Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Insights with Experts. Joining us here today, we are very fortunate to have Mr. Tim Davis. Tim has done numerous things over his life. He's an author, he's a triathlete runner, he's an ultra marathon runner, he's a coach, he's a teacher, and most recently, he's written a book called TRIPOLAR, which is a story all about running and mental health as well. And we'll probably get a little bit of a sneak peek in terms of some of the content in that book here in this interview as well, which I'm really, really looking forward to. Tim, to start off with, how are you?
I'm doing all right. It's Tuesday night. I'm off work, and the weather's still nice here this time of year in Southern California. So I can't complain, all things considering. Most people in my family are doing well. So despite the pandemic, so I'm grateful.
That's good. That's awesome. So, Tim, the first question that I wanted to ask you was, so I just wanted to firstly focus on this book that you wrote, and I wanted to know, like, what made you want to write this book? Like, what made you want to wake up one day and just think, you know what, I'm going to write this book? Like, was there perhaps like a specific moment along the way, or how did that look?
Um, you know, that's such a complicated question. I mean, I think that I've often thought about it here and there. And the first time I really thought about it was after I did my first Ironman triathlon. Because I remember training for that and doing that and having all the anxiety about, will I be able to finish this thing? And then after I finished it, it felt amazing. And I was like, that would be a really cool thing to write a book about doing that. But I'm like, well, just writing a book about doing an Ironman is I don't know if you could stretch that out into a full length novel. I mean, I guess you could. I don't know if I'm that talented of a writer. And then over the years, as I raced, I met a lot of other cool people in the triathlon world and the ultra running world. And it was in 2015 when I did the Oregon Double Amble Triathlon that I met this guy, Wayne Kurtz, who had written a couple books. And I had actually read one of his books. And that race, and he and I ended up sharing a lot of miles together on the run portion of the course. And I was just telling him my story, and he was like, "Dude, you should write a book," because I kind of had a crazy story, I guess. I mean, compared to some people, although probably not as crazy as others. And a lot of people have just told me I should write a book. And I finally got injured about 2 years ago, so I wasn't able to run and bike and swim as much as I like to. So I finally sat down and put some time and effort and focus into getting the story on paper.
All good, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think it's like over time when we have all these experiences and so on, it just we I mean, there's always a time where we can just look back and think, wow, this here, that there, that's actually something that I can really think about. That's something that other people can learn from as well. And I think, I mean, in a way, I mean, would you say you were happy that you got injured in that time and you actually had all that time to actually sit down and actually start with the book?
Well, I was happy that I finally got around to hitting the keys on the computer and putting it in a Google Doc to start. But I was certainly not happy to be injured because one of my biggest things is that regular exercise is a very important component for me, and I think for everybody, to maintain good mental health. So not being able to exercise as much as I like to, although I like to exercise a lot, was frustrating. But yeah, it did force me. It gave me time to sit at the computer and get it done. And it was therapeutic going through the process.
And I guess the exact same thing happened very recently as well with like COVID-19 and everything like that, which has forced so many people inside. And what's actually happened, while it's been horrible in so many ways, so many people have started new things as well. So many things have come out of it, which in a way you could argue is actually quite good. But yeah, so Tim, I wanted to focus on, so in your book, one of the things that you talk about, you talk about do you talk about a point in your life where you were at your lowest point? I guess we can call it that kind of way. And
Hmm.
I think it's safe to say many students have felt this way, some way or another, whether they've been rejected by their dream university or whether they've fallen into a cycle of habits or anything like that has happened. What advice would you give to students then who are perhaps in this lowest point in terms of how to move on from that?
Uh, well, first and foremost, I would say never give up on your dreams. If your dreams don't scare you, then your dreams aren't big enough. So I always say, dream big or go home. And one closed door leads to another open door. Maybe you didn't get into one dream university, but there's lots of good universities out there. And maybe if you're a spiritual type person, maybe God or whatever your higher power is wanted you to be at a different university. And in my case, I didn't go to my first university of choice, but the university I did go to is where I met my wife, who I'm still married to today. So among other things that were good about going to that university. So
Awesome. So yeah, I think that's a really nice point, and I think what one of the main things we've learned in all these interviews in the past as well, some of the most successful people that we've talked to, CEOs, Olympic athletes, aerospace engineers. The only constant thing that I can say about them is that there isn't anything constant. It's all uncertain in the sense that lots of them, they had the straight path in mind, but then instead something happened and they had to change that course, had to do something else. And it turns out that other thing that they did, for example, with your story as well, ended up actually being quite good. So yeah, I think that's just something that's really nice to say. In terms of moving forward, then what I wanted to know as well was about that aspect of your life that revolves around running, ultra marathons. These events which really push you to that point where it literally pushes humans to their limits, right? I wanted to know, as someone who's done numerous of these events, what are perhaps some of the skills that you've learned, perhaps some of the characteristics that you've built over time, which you've been able to apply not just in running, but to other aspects of life, for example, work?
wow, there's so many things I've learned. Especially in ultra endurance sports, they say it's 90% mental. I kind of almost feel like it's 100% mental. So I've certainly developed mental toughness, and I've developed just kind of a sense of knowing that there's a saying we have, my friends in the rooms, that this too shall pass. So even when I'm in a race and I'm in a low point, maybe I'm cramping up. I know that if I get some electrolytes in me and drink some more water, cramping is when you're dehydrated and you're low on electrolytes. Once you replenish those, in a half hour to an hour, if you replenish enough, the cramping will go away and you can get back to moving faster again. There's just I've learned how to be organized, because I always follow a training plan, and I kind of feel like my life is in disarray if I'm not following a training plan. So I'm constantly following one training plan up to one race. Sometimes I have 6 months training plans where there's 2 or 3 races or even more built in, but 2 or 3 big ones. And I just, I've learned how to organize how to train and how much time to allocate to each discipline between swimming, biking, running, and cross training and weightlifting. God, the list goes on and on, but mostly it's about being organized, being determined, being focused, developing mental toughness. I would say those are the things I've learned how to do well.
Would you say that it got easier as like you went on, like, for example, as you kept doing these marathons over and over and over again, they just got easier each time?
That's a funny question too, because a lot of people say 26.2 miles is 26.2 miles, and marathons never felt like they got easier. And I was chasing Boston qualifying time for many years, and I was always like 5 minutes short. At my age group, you have to be really fast. I'm not an elite runner. I'm a middle of the pack kind of runner. Maybe a little bit faster in the middle of the pack. Um, but yeah, definitely, I knew what pain was coming, and for the most part, I did feel like it was got easier to some degree. Like with Ironmans, I don't know, I hate to sound braggadocious when I say this, but I kind of got bored of doing them, because I kind of just maxed out, and I did one sub 12-hour Ironman, and then most of my other Ironmans were between 12 and 13 hours. And I was getting older. I was 40. I'm like, okay, you're probably not going to get another sub 12, because I just never got faster on the bike, and my swim and run stayed about the same no matter how hard I push. So then I just started looking for longer distances. So because I wanted a bigger challenge, and I'm like, if I can't get faster, then I'm going to go longer. So in that sense, I guess maybe they got easier. The shorter distances got easier, because then I was always looking for longer distances and longer challenges, and that became my thing once I realized I wasn't going to get any faster anymore, because I'm 46 now. So
So
my
in
fast twitch muscle fibers are going away.
so in that case, would you say that maybe the first one you ever did, the first ultra marathon, or perhaps the first Ironman that you ever did, was the hardest one, I guess?
Yeah, definitely the first Ironman. I mean, I felt great mentally because I was like, wow, you just did this Ironman. But yeah, my legs were more sore than just doing a marathon, and I was really sore for like a few days. And I think it was the hardest because I didn't know whether I was going to finish or not, you know. after I finished one, it's like, I know I can do this. So my mental toughness had built up because I had, one Ironman under my belt. And so when it came to doing the next one, it wasn't about whether I was going to finish or not. It was just whether am I going to beat my previous time and set a new personal record.
Mhm.
Like I didn't like failure. I didn't even think it was a possibility, And luckily for me at Ironman, I never DNF'd at the Ironman distance.
Yeah, yeah.
DNF stands for do not finish, in case your listeners aren't aware.
There's a saying that the hardest part of any journey is when you start, is taking that first step. So like, what advice would you give to someone perhaps who's never done, I mean, let's not take it to the extent of ultra marathons or Ironmans that only 1.000% of the population can actually. What would you say to that regular person on the street who's perhaps never done maybe a half marathon in their lives? What advice would you give to them in terms of just how to start?
Well, I would tell them kind of what happened to me, because I think you know a little more about my story, but your listeners might not know. I had a long battle with drugs and alcohol, and when I finally got sober in 2007, I gained 60 pounds that year because I didn't care about what I ate, and the people in the rooms of AA and NA told me, "Don't worry about what you eat, just make sure you don't do drugs and alcohol." So I was chain smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, and I'd eaten all the cakes and cookies at all the meetings I was going to. And before I know it, it was New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2008. I stepped on the scale and it said I weighed 250 pounds. And I'm only 5'9" tall. So that was a lot of girth. I was wearing double XL shirts and I was very depressed and very angry. So I made a commitment, I'm like, I hate New Year's resolutions, but I just said starting December 1st, 2009, I'm going to do three things. First, I'm going to stop eating seconds, and eat just reasonable portion sizes. I still ate whatever I wanted. I just stopped eating seconds and thirds and fourths and fifths and so on. I just stopped overeating. Second is I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to exercise somewhere every day for at least an hour. And third is I'm not allowed to watch TV or play video games until I've done my hour of exercise. And now I've learned that I can actually be on my stationary bike and watch Netflix, so I can kill two birds with one stone. You learn strategies if you still want to binge watch your shows, get that exercise in. So I would just say, start where you're at, start small. I mean, on January 1st, 2009, I went out and tried to run a mile because actually when I was in high school, that was my event. And I used to run a sub 5 minute mile. And when I went out to run that mile on January 1st, it took me over 12 minutes. And uh, I was a little depressed, but I was mostly angry because I was like, damn, I used to do this in under 5 minutes and now it takes me over 12 minutes. And I was just like, okay, well, this is the starting point, and if you go on my website, ultratimdavis.com, you see one of the first things you read on the top of the page. It says, start where you're at, each day is a new day and you can start over each day. You can start your day over in the middle of the day. Just start where you're at. For me, it was trying to run a mile. I had to walk some of it. So first thing was just to build up to where I could run a full mile without having to stop and take a walking break. And, and eventually it was running 2 miles, after a few more weeks and then so on until 6 months later, I was back to running half marathon distance.
So small steps each
Yes.
each way, not this huge radical shift from sitting on the couch to hopping on a marathon next week or anything like that. It's small.
Yeah. Yeah, small steps towards your big goals.
So that moment when you stepped on that weighing scale and you saw that number come up, was that like the moment where you thought, what, I need to change, like this is it, I need to something happen with that? I think one of the main reasons why many people don't want to start, I guess, is because they haven't had that significant moment yet. They haven't had this sign that said, look, you need to change or else something is going to happen. Would you, I mean, how do you get someone to change then without them seeing that significant moment?
That's a good question. The other thing I didn't mention was I had a doctor's appointment earlier that month where he told me I was pre-diabetic and I had really high cholesterol. And he's like, you need to change your diet. You need to exercise more because I wasn't exercising. I had a period where I I was just a couch potato, playing when I wasn't working or playing with my two little boys. I was on the couch playing video games with my boys and watching a lot of sports. Wishing I could still do sports, but just taking out and being on the couch. To go back to your question, remind me what your question was again. I spaced out for a second.
Yeah, all good. So yeah, I was just like talking about that significant moment you had when you stepped in that scale. Like, does everyone need that kind of moment? I mean, how can they start even before something comes along and incentivizes them to start working for a goal?
Now that is a very tough question because I think for me, anger fuels my passion. So being so angry about weighing 250 pounds, my thought was, wow, numbers wise, 250 rounds up to 300. It doesn't round down to 200. And I hated being over 200 pounds. So for anybody else, I mean, you got to find some sort of catalyst, or, prayer, meditation, just if you really want to make a change. I mean, if you're not spiritual, you got to find some type of fuel for your passion. If you are spiritual, pray to God. I'm a believer that there's a higher power that created our universe. So I pray when I don't know what to do. I pray and I meditate and look, find answers. But and hopefully you could find some motivation to start with small goals, small steps, and then build up from there once you reach those goals. Kind of set SMART goals.
Right, right. So Tim, I just want to move this interview on to the next part, which is supposed to be for my guest student. So for this interview, I'll just be saying the questions that our guest student Jinlong Chan has sent in. So Jinlong is a student that's currently serving in national service in Singapore, and he wants to go into a future of sports science and coaching and so on. So the first question that he had for you, so as someone that's coached people for a large portion of time, what he wants to know what your coaching philosophy is, and why is that your philosophy as well, I guess.
My biggest coaching philosophy is lead by example. If you want your students, your athletes to perform and you have expectations for them, then you got to make sure that you're demonstrating those same characteristics and qualities that you expect from them. I mean, like at the school I was at was an inner city school. So first and foremost, it was to show up on time, because we had some kids that continually showed up late, and we eventually had to kick them off the team because it's like, if you're not going to be here on time, it's disrespectful to the whole team. So you obviously don't want to be on the team. We gave them a few chances, but if they kept doing it for more than a few weeks, we're like, all right, you're not serious about this. So you got to be serious. And me, when I coached track and field for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019, I actually stopped a year ago, because I left that school and kind of got, started writing the book and got distracted. But when I was coaching that team, I also trained and I did the workouts with the long distance runners. I did train the long distance runners. And I was in the weight room with the kids, and I would do the first set and demonstrate how to do the lifts and how to, what sprints we're going to do, because I made the distance runners do sprints too, and I would go first with all the guys. And of course, the faster, younger studs would beat me, but not all of them would beat me. So, hey, this old man could still hang with some of these guys.
Right. In terms of the second question that he would like to ask you, so as someone that has the perspective of both of someone who's been a runner, someone who's been an ultramarathon runner, triathlete, and the perspective of someone who's actually coached it at the same time, what are perhaps some of the biggest lessons you've learned from being somebody in the perspective of these two sides?
Wow, that's a good question too. I got to say, it's a lot easier to be the athlete or the participant following the coach's order or following the training plan. Um, Coaching for me is frustrating because I'm kind of a perfectionist. I also coached basketball earlier in my career for a couple years, and I was a basketball player for a long time in my youth. And I had a really hard time coaching basketball because I could visualize the plays that I wanted my players to make, but they would do different things. And I still wanted to be the athlete out there doing it because I could see where I wanted them to make the pass, but they wouldn't see the open lane. And so I got really frustrated with that. That's why I moved to coaching individual sports where, those kind of things wouldn't bother me, because I personally excelled better at individual sports later in life too. And I just felt like coaching individuals was a better fit for me and my personality.
Would you say in individual sports are perhaps harder to play? I mean, as someone who's done both, I mean, because when you're in an individual sport, like for example, when you're running, for example, when you're playing like football or something like that, if you mess up, you have numerous other players who are going to help you, who are going to cover for you. But whereas if you run, if you swim, it's just you and your own. So would you say in that sense it's a bit harder?
I think to different degrees, one can be harder than the other. I think individual sports are harder in the sense that you have to be more self-motivated and self-driven, especially if you're just like me. I'm an amateur age group athlete. I'm really, only competing against myself out there, and my personal record times, because obviously I'm not going to catch the elite guys. But with team sports, on the same token, I played football for 4 years. You are a team and you're in it together. So there is that there's also that, like, when you drop the pass and it's 3rd and 3 and you would have got the first down, it's hard not to feel like you let your teammates down, so you want to make sure you catch that pass. So, I mean, in some sense, you are more motivated because you don't want to let your peers down or your teammates down. So I think they both have their upside and downside.
Yeah, of course. I see that. I just want to, in terms of the next question, which I would actually like to ask as well, there's been sort of this movement that's been coming up now in terms of what a coach looks like, and it's been this shift of having the coach being this authoritative figure that tells the students, the players, exactly what to do, to instead leadership sourcing from the students. So the students being the ones that take charge, and we've seen that happen in numerous methods. For example, in the UK hockey team has started using it. Many schools have started using it. We actually had the first expert that we interviewed. He's a really big person on this entire thing. Would you say this is something that you've seen as well? Like, is this something that you've perhaps started to implement in the recent times, giving leadership over to your students?
As a teacher, yeah, we're doing a lot more collaborative learning where we kind of just pose inquiries or queries to our students, and then put them in groups or collaborative learning teams and try to have them come up with their own answers. We just pose something, we give them a little bit of information and we ask them to either, make some sort of claim based on the facts they're given. And then we ask them to cite evidence, and then we ask them to back it up with their reasoning for how that evidence supports the claim. So we have our students doing that in the classrooms a lot, because I'm teaching now mostly and not coaching. With coaching, though, I can see how that would work actually, because the players will have more buy-in to it. If they're kind of, with maybe not with really young kids, but with middle school and high school and older kids, I can see that really being effective. That sounds really neat. I don't know that they're doing it so much here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, it's just something that we've seen over and over again in schools, teams, and so on. That's really been emerging, especially in these past few years. So yeah, I just want to see if that's something that you saw as well. So yeah, Tim, I think we can move on onto the last question that we like to ask in these interviews. It's a classic question, the exact same question we ask to everyone that comes on, just to finish it off. And what that question is: if you could leave the youth with just one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice actually be?
Don't give up on your dreams.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Insights with Experts. We'd now like to introduce a platform that we think would be useful for all of our viewers. Teachers on Wheels is an Australian charity that helps people from all walks of life achieve their career goals. They provide free career guidance and support services to young people in Australia and all over the world, including weekly career webinars with professionals from a diverse range of industries, a resume review service, and a mentoring program in collaboration with Westpac.
Thanks for listening in. This podcast has been brought to you by Desire, a platform designed to bridge the gap between the youth and professional. You can read more about us at desire.org, and you can also check out the section titled Insights with Experts, where you can submit your questions that you might have for future experts and industries that you would like to learn more about. And you can also refer in any experts that you might know yourself.